Brains. Welcome back to Lizard of Doom. I am Max. Today we are doing our second Kitbash competition with my Discord. This, if you don't know, is where we randomise categories that the people in the Discord have given us and do a little Kitbash competition to see who can make the best thing. The 4 categories that got chosen at random this time are Spaceship, Companion, Red, and Zombie Apocalypse. So those are some cool little things we can put together. It's very nice, those ones. They all kind of came together, I think. Before we get into this, last week's video soared through the roof compared to everything else, and that was thanks to people commenting algorithm for the algorithm, I think. So if you could do that, that'd be great. And subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks. Now, I didn't have a lot of time to do this. Everyone else had around a month, maybe slightly more. I left it to the very last weekend because I make these videos on a weekly basis for the Friday, so I was a bit hectic up until this point. So, let's get to it and see what I pulled out of my ass. I start the Kitbash with this strange tube. Now, one of the stipulations of this Kitbash is the 40mm base size. This is a 40mm base. As you can see, it is perfectly the correct size for what I need. So, I cut the bottom off and sanded it smooth around the edges. I have no idea what this tube is from. It's just been hanging around for a while. So I'm starting this Kitbash with a piece of trash. Once it was smooth and I got rid of mould lines, we were ready to move on to the next step. This was going to be my little plinth, and I needed to build it up inside and fill this out. So I laser cut some circles and pushed them in. They were quite snug. I could have probably done them a mil thinner, but this would do. They just need a little bit of forcing. Like a glove. Perfect. With that one in, the rest went in rather smoothly. I built it up to the size I thought I would need and superglued them in place just to make sure nothing was moving around in there. This was now a nice weighted diorama stand for this Kitbash. Next we needed a spaceship floor. This little bit of 40k terrain would do perfectly. I preferred this side and liked these little crumbly bits here because I had a plan for those. Once I'd laser cut a circle out of them, it perfectly fit in the top. It kind of fit in the top. It didn't fit in the top. So I needed to get the scalpel out and just give it a little trim. One small trim later, and now it perfectly fits in the top. I would later have an issue with that skull in the middle, as the foot of my main model would be perfectly there, so I'd have to flip it over and use the other side, which is a little bit less spaceshipy, but it would have to do. Now, the zombie aspect of this Kitbash. These are the mantic zombies. They have some lovely reaching arms, which is what I'm looking for, and some legs that will dip down into this hole we've created. The heads are not what I'm going to be using, however. These Cadian heads off this old sprue are what I'm going to be putting on these zombie bodies. I wanted it to look like there's been some kind of outbreak on an Astro Militarum ship, and these Cadians have now turned into the undead. And it shouldn't be too difficult to put these heads on the mantic zombies. Once I'd built the zombies, all I need to do was a little bit of trimming to get them to fit, because the necklines weren't quite the same. The zombies had very flat tops of the necks, and they kind of stuck out a little bit, whereas the Cadians had rounded bottoms to the heads. All I did was a little bit of clipping here, and then a little bit of scalpeling flat, and they would sit quite nicely on top of the zombie bodies. They were around the right scale. I think the zombie bodies probably were a little bit small, but with the size of the helmet and stuff, you wouldn't really notice that. The zombie neck underneath was a little bit thick, gave him a massive Adam's apple, so that needed a little bit of trimming. Otherwise, I'm quite happy with this stripped to the waist Cadian zombie. This is quite nice and it's going to work perfectly for what I have planned in the future. Once I trimmed all their necks, I had this reaching horde ready to claim the victim who was going to be the star of the show. Time to move on now to the main character in this diorama. This stoic looking commissar would be perfect for this. I wanted him to be kind of calm and collected, and just putting down these zombies as they got to him, not caring that they were his former men and that he knew them in life, just offing them one by one. The kit I built pretty much as standard. The only thing I'd need to change was the arm position. And this was a little bit tricky because the arm goes on pointing downwards and there is no other option really. The way the shoulder plate attaches stops you from bringing the arm upwards, and it would leave a gap if I were to put it on pointing the way I wanted it to point. A little bit of green stuff might be able to fix this, but I think I could fix it in a much more simple way with just using another arm. This is an arm from an old Empire kit with a tiny little dagger in it from a model I'd recently stripped. This textured sleeve is what I would need for this arm to be pointing upwards. The flat way in which this joins the body is perfect, and it's a little bit short, this arm, because the old Empire models are a little bit of a smaller scale. So that kind of leaves it perfect for just cutting that shoulder pad off and cutting him at the wrist, slicing out the midsection of this Empire arm, sticking it on, and smashing it all back together. No green stuff needed, no skill needed. I gauged it against his other arm just to make sure I was doing the right size, cut that bit off, and began gluing them all together. Once that was done, we had a perfect Commissar with his bolter kind of cocked downwards, putting down these zombies as they climbed out of the hole in the floor underneath him. And after this, it's just time to mess around with the composition of the diorama Kitbash thing I'm making. You can see that I've got these guys popping out of the floor, but there is one missing. This guy is going to be the one who is taking the shot from the Commissar. I drilled straight in between the eyes because Commissars do not miss. It is propaganda if you say they do, and every shot lands perfectly. This one has gone in one side, and I widened the hole the other side with the scalpel just to make it look like an exit wound. Once that was done, I drilled a little bum hole for him. I'm used to drilling him on. I've cut that joke out because I don't want to get demonetized. Cheers. Thanks, YouTube. This was for a little pin to go in, which would be a little clipped bit of paper clip. I put some super glue in the hole, shove the tip in. Sometimes it slides out, but that's okay. Just make sure you stick it straight back in. There we go. Lovely. And when that was dry, I'd be attaching him to the edge of this diorama stand I made out of a piece of trash. I had perfectly managed to drill a hole in the edge. I don't know how I'd done this without slipping, but I did. This would go nicely and it would look like he was leaping off the shoulders of his zombies below. Hopefully not too much like he was just sitting on a wall. But the diorama stand will be painted black, so hopefully we can ignore it a little bit more. I had perfectly positioned the Commissar's arm and this zombie sitting on the edge here. I had done a little bit of planning and was pretty sure it would fit, but it fitted perfectly. A little bit of pressure, clicking that bit down into place, making sure his nose was under the gun and the bullet hole was directly in front of the barrel to make it look like a shot had just rung out in the middle of this spaceship and the first zombie had been put down. One of the requirements of this diorama was to be a companion. I know the zombies kind of have companions, there's 3 of them, but we're going to give the main guy a little friend of his own. My little companion will be this chap here. This little servitor will be the Commissar's companion, the last survivor on the spaceship and his little robot buddy floating around trying to keep things at bay. To put him on the base, I used the same paperclip I used as a pin and bent it out of shape to this. This would be a faux wire coming out of the bottom of the servitor and make it look like he was floating and dragging this wire behind him along the spacecraft. I wound it around the Commissar's feet to make it look more in the scene and make it interact with everything else, and used super glue to keep that in place. This was coming together swimmingly, and it had only taken me a couple of hours to get to this point. It was very close indeed, with the deadline looming for the competition. Once I had that bit dried, I took this damaged cable off. I'd previously clipped this bit of cable to use it in a different kit bash. I don't know what that was or when I'd done that, but I had done that, so I needed to fix this damaged one. And the way I did that was scraping it off with a scalpel and then drilling a small hole for the end of the paperclip to go in and replace that cable with this new paperclip cable that would hold it up in the diorama. And now we can see him peering over his Commissar friend's body. And that little light on the side of the servitor is going to be very important in the coming paint job. But for now, I am very happy with the layout of this diorama Kitbash thing. I'd cleverly put it together by not gluing that piece of spaceship floor in, so I could pop that out, and I had glued everything else to it. The one zombie was glued to the edge by his butt, and this bit could pop right out around him, and I could prime up underneath in black, so no one could see the bright bits in the shadows. Smart, Maxwell, for once. Once I'd done that, it was time to glue it in place. I used a bit of super glue to hold this because I didn't know what kind of plastic that tube was, and I didn't want to use plastic glue in case it wouldn't bond properly. I then poked some sausages of green stuff around the edges just to roughly fill in those gaps so we couldn't see them in the finished product. So now I was running out of time. I had to do a paint job that was going to be effective but quick. I decided to make it a nighttime scene, as if all the power in the ship had failed as the contagion had broke loose. And we had one little thing lighting the whole diorama. This was going to be the quickest, mostly airbrush paint job I could do to get this ready in time. So I primed it all in black, leaving the bottom of the little stand I'd made because I knew I'd be holding it there and I didn't want to rub that paint off. I set the tone for the nighttime paint scheme by building up through some very dark blues. These are from the Army Painter airbrush range. I started with Thunderstorm Blue and then ended with Dark Sky. This is as high as I would be going. The third one in the Army Painter triad I would then mix with a bone colour, this is Ushabti Bone from Games Workshop, to make an edge highlight. The beauty of mixing a normal paint with an airbrush paint is the airbrush paint is already thinned nicely, so it creates a nice thinned mix ready to apply. I use this to edge highlight everything. Everything on the model was edge highlighted with this nice mix to create some separation between all the areas that were a dark blue colour. This was the base of the miniature and didn't take very long at all. As I said, time was running out. I needed to get this done fast. With that looking rather monotone, it was time to add a little bit more colour. You can see I've still got a lot of black underneath for the shadow. This is meant to be a dark colour scheme, and when it's put to a dark background, I believe it looks a lot better. This little light up here is going to be the light source in this whole environment. I started with Encarmine Red from the Army Painter airbrush range and built up through that zenithal. I sprayed it everywhere over where this light would be splashing from the angle that light was facing the miniature. I also kind of made things up a little bit so it looked good, because there's a mix you've got to get between reality and what looks good on the miniature. I was doing quite a wide angle from this light, just to make sure I caught all the interesting detail and raised areas. And there we go, that's after a couple of layers of the Encarmine Red. The next paint up in this would be Pure Red. This is the mid paint for this triad. I focused that again on the light to start with, and then spread it around the surrounding areas, adding a lovely red glow to the areas. Now this was the last red I should have used, and I think I made the mistake of completing this triad to its fullest. This is the triad that's kind of like for Blood Angel Red, and it ends with an orange. This lovely red right now is looking fantastic, but when I put the orange on, it was going to be a mistake. So the orange was too orange, essentially. This was a mistake that I had to fix quickly. I covered that whole area that I'd done orange with a thin layer of white through the airbrush, and that helped immensely. The next thing I did was paint that light completely white. My next step is going to be something transparent, so this gave it the chance to shine through. The next step being Bloodletter Glaze, the old glaze from Games Workshop. This is a nice pinky red, and I hoped it would desaturate that orange and make it look more red than orange. I have to say, after a few thin coats, it blended all these reds nicely. I then went about doing the blue Gilliman's glaze from Games Workshop. The old glaze section was fantastic, and Duncan Rhodes has brought out a matching glaze section in his 2 thin coats range, which is fantastic news for fans of that. Once I'd done that, there was only one step left really. To put a little bit of shine and a little bit of brightness back into this lens, just doing a little white highlight around the curvature of the top there. And we're done! This was the quickest paint job I have ever done. I only had a couple of hours left till deadline. I then primed and sprayed black the rest of this miniature stand just to make it look nice and neat and like it wasn't part of the experience. I added a little bit of red blood, Sin City style, to this rather monotone section. And I think it looked nice. Like I said, Sin City style, it popped out that little bit of red there, adding a little bit more red for the red theme of this miniature Kitbash. These dashes were to simulate the brains that had just been splattered out the back of his head from this shot from the Commissar. And I applied them in small, scratchy, blobby brush marks down his back. And we have the finished thing. Now let's have a look at that with some cool music. Now, it has been competition time. My Patreons have voted on who has won. And I won the last one, the very first one, and I'm proud to announce this time that I didn't win. It is my Discord admin, Okamic. That's what he goes by in the Discord, so if you're in there, say congratulations to him. It is this lovely little zombie diorama with an airlock in the background. I think that really sells it as being on a spaceship. Congratulations to that. I think that's what I could have done more in mine, is sell it more as being on a spaceship. Now that is the winner, but as a prize for this competition, the top 3 places get to be in the video. So that's the winner, I'm 2, and then 4 people were 3rd. So let's have a look at their work. Zero Jet Zero has made this lovely orc combo, absolutely covered in blood. His little friend there having a whale of a time. Yeah, that's really nice. It's not got a zombie in it, but it certainly sells the zombie with the amount of red that's in it. This one is from Boy de Chanel, and this is kind of a curveball. I really like this entry because it's on a 40mm base, which was one of the requirements, but it leans off it a bit and it's gone really miniature scale. And the red chicken as the companion is a very interesting twist that is kind of out there. And yeah, I really like this one too. This one from Dubwub is interesting. A red Nurgling. I've never seen a red Nurgling before, and they look like perfect little devils. Why wouldn't you paint them like that? All the junk on the base really looks very spaceshipy. There is a nice red, strong contingency here, and the zombiness of the mutated Chaos Cultist is kind of perfect for this. Well done. And finally, the person known as Shimmy Shim in my Discord has put this orc one, again with a little grot friend, very nice. This one has like a spaceship wall behind it with dead written on, nice touch. And I like the skull in the orc's head, his whole skin's gone off the top of his head. It's very nice, and I like the red lighting you've used as well. Is that cheating? What do you think? Is that cheating using red lighting?
No.
Not cheating. So these are all the 3rd place. If you think you can beat us, then join the Discord, links below. If you would like to judge this, then join the Patreon. The next one is going to be a Christmas one, and we're going to have some special guests on it. So that's going to be very interesting. Remember to comment algorithm down below just to help this video out. You guys did it in droves last time, and that did fantastically. Thank you for that. Subscribe if you aren't already. Click on my like button. Oh yes, please. And I will see you next time. Remember, it is not a pile of shame. It's a pile of future fun. See you next time, kids.